AdLib is the DSP-agnostic buying platform to scale your programmatic campaigns smarter, faster, and more profitably. AdLib helps independent agencies and marketers deliver premium programmatic performance without the complexity, cost, or overhead of traditional DSPs. Their platform provides the tools, data, and automation to run enterprise-quality campaigns, from CTV and audio to geofencing and YouTube, all under one roof with zero trafficking headaches. Plus, they're not just a platform, they're your growth partner. The AdLib team helps you win new business, expand budgets, and deliver measurable ROI that keeps clients coming back. It's time to unlock programmatic. Join leading marketers worldwide who are using AdLib to deliver more campaigns with better results. Check out getadlib.com.
Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I'm Joe Zappa. I'm with Eric Franchi, as always, and we are joined today by Doug Lauretano, another beautiful, probably Italian name. I can't be sure of that. Doug will tell me in a second. Doug is the CEO and founder of a new DSP called Tuple. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's going to tell us that too. What's up, Doug?
I prefer Tuple, but Tuple is fine, and other people say Tuple, so it's fine.
Tuple sounds like a nice, flower or something of that kind. Where does the name Tuple come from?
So early days of building the platform, which was nearly 2 years ago now, I was talking to some engineering friends, and we were talking about the way that data would be handled within the platform, and they kept on talking about tuples. I had no idea what they were talking about, and I had to stop them and been like, what are you talking about? So a tuple is a concept within development work about kind of immutable sets of things. They kind of dumbed it down for me, talking about like quintuple, is a set of 5 things. But a tuple in general is something engineers understand a lot better than I will probably ever understand.
They understand it a lot better than marketing hacks like us. I don't know what a tuple is, but now I know. I'll learn.
I'm interested in naming things for whatever reason. One of the reasons might be because growing up, as a 6-year-old, my favorite number was a Google, and that's 1 with 100 zeros. And so obviously Sergey and those guys decided to name the company Google just because it was something large, not because it had anything to do with the actual number. So I always thought that was really interesting, using a mathematical or scientific or, some term that isn't exactly like what you're doing, but it's somewhat related to it. So that's how Tuple kind of came about.
Doug, you're here because you do and did something that Joe tells everybody to do, which is get on social media, get in the replies, start talking to people. You never know where it goes. And in this case, you got yourself on the open market path. So we love it.
I like to mix it up a little bit. So always willing to give my opinion and respond where I don't agree to things, probably more often to when I agree. But hey, that's what Twitter's all about, right?
Well, tell us a little bit about that, when you started getting active on Twitter and why.
Yeah, I think maybe it was during the pandemic. And I think maybe it had something to do with having a lot more time on my hands, less time commuting. I think more time focused on my work, and then trying to also find outlets that wasn't solely focused on my work. So had some back and forths on LinkedIn, I think, before I really started, engaging on Twitter. I had some people reach out to me thinking that, the kind of engagements I was having on LinkedIn may not be beneficial for my career. I think that was...
Hold on. You can't just fly by that one.
It wasn't all that bad by any means. I think things have evolved a lot since then on how people engage on LinkedIn. I think having any sort of debate on LinkedIn 7 or 8 years ago was frowned upon, and people thought, oh, you're representing your company, you're putting something out there that will never be erased, and it's going to come back to bite you. And, I viewed Twitter as kind of a different environment that really could be a little bit more of a free-flowing outlet where just, actual debate could happen. I think LinkedIn has kind of evolved into that and devolved into other things as well. Twitter, I think we've all seen kind of the peaks and valleys of ad tech Twitter. Even though we saw a momentary peak recently, I think that was a very short-lived thing. But yeah, it's just something to engage with, I've gotten to know a lot of people, which is great. One of the key drivers for Tuple, Sarah Caputo, I met on LinkedIn. I've met you guys really through Twitter, in earnest, really. So yeah, it's been nothing but good.
Great, man.
So you decided to build a new DSP. I believe you're calling it a next gen DSP, Doug. Tell us about that. Why do we need a next generation of them? I thought, I think a lot of people were hoping we'd just get rid of them. So what's the next generation look like?
So basically, around 2 years ago, right around the time when I was having that conversation with those engineers, I was building a business for a company called Civic Science. So Civic Science is a research company, has really interesting declared consumer intent data that before they hired me to start an advertising business was solely using that for research. They hired me to build out that business in 2021. And basically we were offering packages to advertisers of custom segments built off that declared consumer intent. And we were offering it either as managed service, where our team would be using DSPs to buy against that data, or we were curating deal IDs and we would push that to the DSP seats of our advertisers. Basically, in that experience, got to work with and engage with almost every DSP out there. And as somebody who has a background more on the supply side of programmatic, I was almost horrified by what I learned. Mostly, I think mostly the platforms were just pretty limited, but at the core, there's a really big fundamental problem in programmatic that's driven by legacy DSPs that very few people know about.
What's the problem?
So basically, everybody has to keep their infrastructure costs down. In order to do that, about 50% of good impressions, not junk, not things that nobody wants to buy, 50% of good impressions fall to the cutting room floor. And so a buyer who has really interesting data and could build a really interesting package of inventory around that data, they could only get at about half of that. And all of this is really kind of started with header bidding, 2012, 2013-ish. The real proliferation of header bidding started, 2016, it really became kind of a normal part of programmatic. And if you think about it, every single impression on the open web is firing off bid requests through probably about, depending on, what point in history, but maybe about 50 different SSPs. So a legacy DSP is working with 50 or so partners that are all sending them the same impression. So obviously I understand, particularly now that I'm paying an infrastructure bill, that I wouldn't want to see those 50 impressions, but they have different buyers who want different supply paths. They want to do SPO because they have a deal with this SSP or that SSP. So what ends up happening is the DSP limits the amount of impressions or bid requests that an SSP can send to them. They'll say you have a cap of 2 million QPS, queries per second. So an SSP needs to decide what they're going to send. So an SSP doesn't try to send everything. And then when a DSP receives the 2 million QPS from SSP XYZ, they then further throttle that down because they don't want to waste compute bringing that into their platform. Every step of the way, there's impressions that are just being lost.
Got it. So this is the idea behind the announcement this summer or this spring rather of Index Exchange's Index Cloud, right? Basically get buyers closer to the edge. And we had Shane Shevlin of Bedrock, one of our portfolio companies, another DSP, kind of talking about that in an earlier episode. That's how one company is addressing the problem, yeah?
Yes, but, and there's a big but there, is that you can't fully address that problem just by bringing somebody on board. That the infrastructure cost then becomes Index's problem instead of Bedrock or anybody else. I've had conversations with Index about us working together. That's a real possibility in the not too distant future. But there's still infrastructure costs. There's still ways, that you really can't get at the impression. And we're looking to solve that not only by getting closer to the SSP, because that is maybe not from purely the way that Index is doing it, but we're doing it in other ways, leveraging kind of containerization, some kind of agentic workflows. It's really about making sure that buyers have full visibility, full access to every impression and are able to evaluate every impression. Because if they don't, then the entire promise of a DSP is kind of pretty shallow.
How are you attacking this?
So right now we are using basically the same technology that the guys at Chalice and others, we use containerization to basically get view through to every single impression at the SSP. That allows us to basically make decisions and allows us to understand everything that's there, so good impressions don't end up not coming through. So in my experience with Civic Science, if they build a segment of 10 million impressions on a daily basis, the buyer's going to see 10 million impressions in Tuple. And we're not going to drop anything from there. And it really is like we're showing the buyer double the amount of impressions that they would see in Trade Desk or Viant or, really any other legacy DSP.
So what's the trade-off for you? Like, you're able to do this just because of a different kind of technology, or is there you're absorbing costs that they're not? Please forgive the dummies.
No, not at all. I represent the long-winded guy, so I can, I can lose people. So there's two main reasons. So one is the containerization. So we're able to basically place logic within the SSP that is basically doing pre-filtering based on what our buyers want. So the SSP doesn't need to guess what the DSP may respond to. Mm-hmm. We are telling them because of the way that we're implemented in their system. So that's the first major difference in approach. The second is that we're never going to work with 50 SSPs. There's no reason to. We are currently live with one SSP, Media.net. Probably not a shock to people who know me. We will be live with another SSP before the end of the year, possibly one more after that. The other thing that we're doing within the containerization piece is we're deduplicating. So we are never pushing the same impression to Tuple, but we're limiting duplication as much as possible. That is not only a cost thing, but if you think about it, if you have a platform that is designed to optimize for performance and you throw a whole bunch of noise at it, the best algorithms in the world, the best technology in the world, if it has a whole bunch of noise, if it has 47 times the same impression that it's seeing at the same time, there's going to be issues with that. So we believe that the lack of noise that we have without duplication gives our algorithms and our performance a leg up as well. So we end up with lower cost and better performance.
So see every impression. The other kind of pillars of your messaging is transparent fee and absolute control. Kind of walk us through those, especially I think helpful to the listener versus maybe some of the DSPs that they might think about in marketing.
Yeah. So the transparent fee piece, I think, is extremely important. I think you've seen a lot of that play out in the trades over the last 6 months or so.
Never heard of it.
Never. Part of the issues that we had at Civic Science that I was describing before was that we would sign a deal with a DSP. We thought we understood the cost structure, and then we would get a bill and we were like blown away. Like, how is our effective cost for a DSP more than 35%, to a point where like we kept on looking at the contract and not really understanding how it got to that point. And then I was at Marketecture, I forget which one. Jeff was talking to Ari on stage, and Jeff was bemoaning the fact that they needed to have line items on their invoice. And Ari was kind of giving him, saying how that was, he hated that at Beeswax and everything. If I'm a client of a DSP, I want to know what you're going to charge me before I even transact. Like, if we think about,
you want to know the cost of the services you're buying.
Big chunk, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we did building the Tuple platform from the ground up is that we included the cost any fees that we were charging in the UI. So like there's a column that actually shows, like you're looking at your daily reporting, you're looking at, different campaigns, actually shows the fees that you're going to pay. I don't understand why that's something that nobody else could do. That they definitely could, but I guess the question is why wouldn't they? Having fees that are not completely visible or transparent may be a benefit to other DSPs, but that's something that we're not interested in doing. And I think it's something that, some of our early partners really appreciate. And then absolute control kind of goes back to, it's partially about that first pillar about being able to see every impression. Because if you can't see every impression, you don't have real control, right? If you're buying from a platform that's supposed to be able to access the open web and you can't access everything you want to access, then you're not really in control. And then the other part of it really is the way that AI has evolved and has started to seep into the DSP world. We are AI native in our platform. We have an MCP server, which can kind of connect. Through Claude, I could understand how like our things are pacing, different things like that. I could actually make changes, even though everybody gets mad at me when I do that. Our goal with AI within our platform is to make it operationally superior. When other platforms talk about AI outcomes, that's where I think they're going astray. We have the ability to turn on AI optimizations, but the actual buyer gets to see everything that the AI optimization is doing. Where other platforms, it's basically like, tell me what you want and I'll do it for you. And I'll just get you what you want and you'll just pay me how much we agreed you paid me.
So I feel like that opens up an interesting commercialization question, right, Doug? Because there are probably a lot of buyers out there who do want, like, I don't need to know what's happening. You just tell me, just go get the outcome I want. But so then you have differentiation because you're essentially going after a type of buyer, right, who specifically wants to know what's going on under the hood.
That's right. That's right. I think it's akin to self-driving rideshare. We have windows in our car. We let the people who's in the Waymo see where they're going. And they can make adjustments if they need to. Where AI outcomes is basically you're in a Waymo that has no windows. I wouldn't be comfortable in a Waymo that has no windows.
It's actually a really good example because I think a lot of people wouldn't love it, but they actually might be able to get with that. Supposedly self-driving cars are supposed to be aware of what's going on. And some people probably, they put on Netflix or whatever the fuck, and they have no idea what's happening. So I think it's really true. Like, I don't think there is necessarily a right way or a wrong way. I think there is a right way for certain customers. And what's interesting about what you're saying is you're carving out, okay, we are for the advertisers who actually care. It reminds me of, Paul Connecton, the marketing consultant who was Ari's CMO for a while at Beeswax. He always said that like what Beeswax did was they said, we're the DSP for control freaks because it was more customizable. And so it's kind of a similar message. And how are you seeing that play out in early conversations with customers?
We see it play out like it resonates. And to your point, maybe it's because of the type of customers we're talking to. If you talk to somebody that is in a DSP every day, they feel like they should be in control. I don't know what the ratio is to what you described, those that will just be like, fine, just do it. But to me, those people who are like, fine, just do it. In my eyes, that's not a DSP. There's a reason why Arthur at Vibe, like he never called it a DSP, right? Because it did more of that than it did kind of typical DSP stuff. A DSP is a tool. Like, I don't mean to kind of downplay what we're building, but like we are building a tool for others to drive results with. I like the idea of kind of like a DSP for control freaks. Maybe there's some sort of twist I could put on that to figure something out. Like we've said something about like a buying platform for sophisticated marketers. That's also a nod to, calling everybody else who wouldn't want to use Tuple unsophisticated, but we are going after a segment. I wouldn't call it a niche. I would call it a segment that I think is significant in size.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's an ICP exercise, right? It's not a niche. It's just like we are for a certain type of media buyer, and this is the kind of media buyer we're for. And I think like a lot of early stage companies obviously really struggle with that. So I think having a sense of that upfront is just valuable.
Yeah, I don't think it's also an unproven segment, right? Like you've got companies, in our portfolio, right? You have like Chalice and Swim and Bedrock. They're all just kind of like building these next gen sophisticated tools for buyers that care. And, clearly with your early momentum, that's a real segment. So I think it's awesome. So you have a sell side background, right? Like you came up through like OpenX and media.net. Why not build sell side tools? Why go to the buy side?
I think, and it's funny, I had a conversation with Andrew Casale actually about Index Cloud. And after talking for a while, like he had this smile on his face. He's like, it's good to talk to somebody that's building a DSP that has sell side sensibility. And I do think it's a different perspective. And that's probably why we're building a different platform. Media.net basically, like I was part of building a programmatic exchange from scratch. So I did that. That was fine. There was a whole different list of frustrations there, but dealing with DSPs was one of the bigger ones. One of the reasons why we've gotten to this place that I described as being, somewhat of a broken system is that DSPs view SSPs as adversaries and vice versa in most cases. Jeff coming out and, doing his op-ed and calling all SSPs resellers and them changing the nomenclature in their platform to all SSPs being resellers after spending over a decade building a business with those partners, to me, just like is an example of like how that there's just heightened animosity between the two sides. So somebody that really understands the supply side, building something on the demand side, I just think is, an advantage that I have. And, it's something different. I didn't want to keep doing the same thing, I guess.
Yeah, two great points. And I think it's time with the way the market is evolving, with the buy side, the sell side coming close together, AI somewhat, at least at this point, kind of favoring the sell side in terms of capabilities. I think it makes a lot of sense. Talk about the company. So how long has it been around, Tuple? Like, what's the team size? Do you have co-founders?
So we officially launched or incorporated in March. I started building the platform as a bit of a side project while I was at Civic Science almost 2 years ago, I mentioned earlier. Over that time, basically worked with a lot of friends and partners on doing that. And I was able to come to a place where I was able to focus on it full time. I will say as of right now, I am the sole founder. I have other contributors that may eventually join me and would definitely be considered founders. As of right now, I'm going at it, as kind of the sole founder to get this off the ground. Right now, I have a product lead who's full time and a go-to-market lead who's fractional. I mentioned Sarah, and on the engineering side, we have 11 folks that are fractional. So probably the equivalent of 5 or 6 full-time heads.
How are you using AI as a solo founder to get more leverage?
Everything that we do, there's an AI note taker. We mostly use Granola as a platform, which is just a bit more flexible than some of the other ones. And then we're basically able to kind of search and summarize all those notes, which it is more impactful than I thought it would be. Really being able to start every conversation, everybody on the same page, to be able to know that things that you say and promises that you make, whether they be dates or what have you, are kind of on the record. I think it's something that helps with, overall managing people that are, I mentioned a bunch of them are fractional. They're all over the world. My head of product is in Dubai. engineering. There's folks in India. There's folks in the US. That has been a bit of a godsend. I mentioned before, the ability for us to even access Tuple as a platform from Claude or, another platform, but we mainly use Claude, is also something that, for me, it's a little bit less, it's less impactful. For teams that are helping on the managed service side, it's something they use all the time, to be able to do something on your phone pretty easily that, you would definitely need to be in front of a computer for. So that's been pretty impactful as well.
Nice. Makes sense. Joe, you got any more biz questions, or can we launch into some fun stuff?
No, do the fun stuff.
All right. Yeah. Sometimes we like to do lightning round, but Doug, you have a special interest that I find very noteworthy, which is you're a pizza connoisseur.
I don't know about connoisseur. I would say like I am
aficionado.
obsessed with pizza. Aficionado. I'll take aficionado.
Obsessed.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with it. Like, look, I grew up in Brooklyn. The pizza that I had every day as a little kid, walking down to the avenue just to grab a slice, is about as good as you can get. So I'm known not only in the industry, but amongst my friends as being somebody that will tell you what he feels about a certain pizzeria.
That's one could say the same thing about where I grew up, Staten Island. All right, but it's 2026. It's not the 1980s, 1990s. Where's the best pizza right now, Doug, on the East Coast?
So my all-time favorite is L&B Spumoni Gardens.
Hard to argue.
But I need to add in others though, because since that's Sicilian and it's a very unique kind of pizza. My favorite new place that everybody needs to go to is Lucky Charlie's in Bushwick. It is whole oven. Yesterday, I found myself in New Haven, Connecticut, bringing my daughter to this lacrosse thing at Yale. So I had time to spare, and I went to Sally's, which is, people rave that Sally's and Frank Pepe's is the best pizza in the world.
They're good. I've been there.
Lucky Charlie's blows him out of the water. And I really enjoyed Sally's. I really enjoyed it, but it's a very similar style. But this guy, Nino Caliglio, who's a Brooklyn guy who's actually in Jersey now. He has a bunch of places in Jersey. One of his friends found a coal oven that would be grandfathered in because it was already there in Bushwick, that goes underneath the sidewalk. It's so big. It's something like 15 feet by 20 feet or something like that. And during the winter when there's snow, it all melts because it's, the 900 degrees underneath it. And so they called Nino, who's a big pizza guy, and they opened Lucky Charlie's. It is unbelievable.
Wow.
So I'll go with Lucky Charlie's.
Doug is dropping some alpha here on the open market pod.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite spot in the New York City or New Jersey area, Eric?
Yeah. So I grew up on Staten Island, and we have a place called Danino's. You ever been to Danino's, Doug?
I have. Yep. Very good.
That is my number one. And they opened one up in South Jersey, not too far from where I spend time over the summer. So I get my fill there. In New York City, hard to argue with Joe's. I mean, just to grab a slice somewhere, I'm very hard to argue with Joe's.
Joe's is very good. Lindustry, which is originally a Brooklyn place in the West Village, very good. And right near Lindustry, a couple of others have kind of opened up to try to challenge Lindustry, and that's Slice House and Fermento. I prefer Slice House, so I would say Lindustry, Slice House, Fermento, but all three of those are really good.
There we go. All right, Joe, what you got?
Well, my favorite place in North Brooklyn is Mario's. It's a good joint. Got a sort of sweet sauce. That's sort of my local pizza place. I don't get pizza very often, but when I do, that's where I like to go. And they have a chicken slice. I'm just always looking to get chicken, no matter what meal it's. So
throw chicken parm, chicken cutlet.
Yeah, throw it on. Throw some chicken cutlet bites on a pizza. I'm here for that.
Manhattan Avenue?
Yeah.
I've never been.
Doug is adding it to whatever. Pizza.
No,
Trader Vic's.
my Google Maps, I have saved like places. So like if I end up
That's so cool.
someplace,
Yeah.
I know where I need to go.
Next time you're in Boone 20, head up.
That's awesome. Well, Doug, thank you for coming on the pod. This has been a lot of fun. I too believe that there is an opportunity to build next gen DSPs. I think there's an opportunity to build more of them. And I wonder if, the DSP of the future either is a DSP or a DSP is going to figure out how this thing evolves. So it's awesome to see you innovating in this space.
Thanks.
Absolutely. How can people find out more about Tuple?
Our website, tupleads.com, TUPLEADS.com. Easiest way to find out more about us.
Awesome. Doug, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
See you next week, everybody.